A tweet by Houston Rockets general manager on Hong Kong has escalated into a geopolitical nightmare for the NBA. But the conflict has also become a thorn in the side for many American businesses that some say must choose between reaping the benefits of the Chinese market and standing up for American values. Although the general manager of the Houston Rockets deleted his original tweet, the controversy is reverberating throughout China and the U.S., roping in politicians, pundits and companies, in addition to basketball fans. What's at the core of this debate, and what's the danger of politicizing business? Joining me for the discussion are Paul Dong, Sports Business, EI Asia Limited, a transnational sports broker company, and Han Hua, Fellow at the Chongyang Institute of Renmin University of China. Welcome to both of you to The Point. Now, some of the latest comments coming out of the United States, for instance, some U.S. politicians are saying the NBA shouldn't restrict what its employees say and or kowtow to Beijing. Human rights shouldn't be for sale, and that China is using its economic power to silence critics, even those in the U.S., and especially implying that the NBA is selling its soul to make money to do business with the China regime. Paul, your reaction to these comments?
Well, it's a very unfortunate incident that happened to the sporting world, especially to such a promising league of a single sport. Among all sports, various sports are flushing into China to grab a share of the hugely potential market here. But the NBA is on a very commanding position after more than 3 decades of efforts. After Michael Jordan enjoying his popularity here in Asia, Yao Ming as such a key person, even after his retirement, and after he became the president of or the chairman of the Chinese Basketball Association, and just a few weeks after the World Cup of basketball being hosted in China with an American team traveling around several cities, displaying their skills, although they didn't end up so well.
Are we seeing a long overlying issue really surfacing now? Because this is not just about the NBA, right? Other U.S. companies operating in China are also putting this kind of pressure, although from very hardcore politicians or pundits who are really pressing companies to choose between doing business or safeguarding values. Paul, how do you look at this issue? Well,
potential risks are everywhere. Of course, I think this one is not entirely unavoidable because it's quite like a PR blunder. I think at that moment, the man who caused the trouble just for a very brief moment forgot that he has such a huge stake in a country related to the territory that he commented on. And then very immediately, he would, even without the protest, without the very angry comments and reactions from the Chinese fans, he would very quickly realize, oh, this is something that I, uncharacteristically made, the mistake. But when it happens, yes, it's a test of how prepared various stakeholders and parties have been prepared. I mean, over the decades, over the years, for such a potential danger or risk.
Yeah. Well, again, that question, is it a fair question? Asking business, look, before you go and do business with someone, you have to first look whether their political system is one like ours, whether they share similar values like us. For instance, the United States is doing a lot of business with Saudi Arabia. Before they go and sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, do they ask themselves that kind of questions, Han Hua?
Of course. Speaking of
immediate... Of course or of course not?
Of course they should ask about...
They should?
They should. And also the same thing here in China. Speaking of this immediate reaction and answer to your question regarding whether there is a contradiction of making profits in China while protecting the American value, I don't see any contradiction. But there is a third dimension which need to be taken more clear.
Why do you not see any contradiction?
Because I'm saying this is okay while you're protecting your American value, while making profits for American companies in overseas markets. But I want to add, there is a third dimension saying you also need to protect, maybe protect more about the other country's value or value the other country's value system when you do business with the third party countries. This is the dimension I want to emphasize. So being Rome, do what Romans do as Romans do. Being in China, which is regarded as the second largest market for NBA or for any sports industries from America. The Chinese system, not only the political system, but its culture, its history, need to be valued
I understand that,
more.
and I would say people would understand that too. But what if, and maybe it's not true, what if these two values, these two customs are contradicting each other, and they have a problem, right? Okay, for instance, in America, they say they support freedom of expression, whereas a lot of people would disagree with that because you don't have absolute freedom of expression in the United States either, but they say that. And then they will say, okay, in China you don't support freedom of expression, so there you have a problem because you can't do both.
But we also support freedom of expression, but we have the minefield.
In a lot of people's mind that we don't. That's the problem, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's the American value. Not only support their freedom of expression, but they think that China does not have the freedom of expression. And we think as Chinese, we
so
have our...
pitching these two political systems
but
against each other.
There should be some middle ground. The middle ground as to value the bottom line. The minefields, or put it by Joe Tsai, saying that the third rail issues that do not need to be touched. For example, for Chinese, the bottom value or the minefields could be the sovereignty, the separatist movement in Hong Kong right now. These are the bottom lines that we don't need anybody who does not know anything about Chinese culture, Chinese history to touch upon this issue while you do your own business, you mind your own business and profits. Yeah. That is okay. Yeah.
Paul, your take on this?
Well, I rather look at this issue more like, you know, for a business entity, it's more like a PR crisis. Of course, there have been, over the last few years or even longer, there have been PR crises facing other maybe smaller but still quite famous or influencing Western brands in their new TV commercial or online ads, which caused, you know, quite some trouble among Chinese citizens. And they would immediately apologize or withdraw something. But in this particular case, I think between China and the United States, there are skirmishes mainly between the two governments on the governmental level. There is almost no, you know, no week or no month without any trouble over the last 1 year.
But between the basketball fans.
So that's against the backdrop. And if you look at what's going on politically inside America, I think the two parties or the two camps are trying to find some common ground where they should express their basic support for something. And then China or Hong Kong issue fell like a victim of what they can grab so easily.
Well, the Hong Kong issue is very polarizing at this moment, and it's very...
Right. American politicians have been making remarks on Hong Kong over the last few months, but without causing so much anger among... So it's more
because it's not business.
So it's more like you know, again, a PR issue. I think for over 3 decades, the company of the NBA, did you really ever look at who your fans in China are? Or you easily say, we draw a picture of them, we visualize how they look like and what they practice on the court and how they buy American-made stickers or a limited edition of shoes. So but you never ask a question how they think, where their values are, and how they would react to nationalism-related issues than their older generations. And they were so surprised. And even some Chinese people of our age were kind of surprised by how the younger generation reacted to this. This is a lesson for almost everybody.
And for a lot of people, it's it's a surprise as well that Murray, before he sent out this tweet, he didn't foresee the kind of impact that this might have among the Chinese people. I mean, he was tweeting this in English, he was tweeting this on Twitter. Okay, he probably assumed that nobody would know this in China. Is that what he's betting on, or?
I still think for Americans, including the general manager of the Houston Rockets and many other people, they care to read very independently about what's going on inside the U.S., inside their own community or neighborhood, without jumping to conclusions so easily. But when it comes to international issues, they don't pay enough attention. They follow what their media, like the CNN or Fox or CNBC, has been saying about the situation in that particular place. And because they don't pay for their, they don't have costs for making mistakes about their comment on that place.
So is this, finally, Han Hua, is this all about China not agreeing to American companies or members of people associated with American companies not, having too much freedom of expression, or is it something else? I mean, is this China or Chinese people expressing outrage over the freedom of expression that's being upheld by the NBA?
I think this is China's reaction towards either business entities or politicians or any players who are getting involved into China market, China businesses, or China's activities, and also being ignorant towards Chinese culture, Chinese bottom lines, towards this political culture and histories. I think this is the issue. This is the reaction. And just as Paul Dong mentioned, the younger generations are making bigger reactions towards this issue.
So how are things going to play out? I mean, it looks like it's still escalating, and more NBA players or personnel have stood out to take sides, or feel obliged to do so. And of course, the more people say that they're standing with Adam Silver, who is the NBA commissioner, the more it's going to irritate the Chinese fans. And so how is the situation going to develop, Paul? Your prediction?
It will be very difficult. I think there are very different expectations in the outcome of the next week. I mean, the rest of the week. We understand that Mr. Adam Silver was scheduled to fly into China.
He already landed.
Yeah. Okay.
And what will happen, I think he will try to stay away from the spotlight of the media and try to talk to Yao Ming and other stakeholders and see how they can sort it out.
How about a formal apology from them?
But
because they're also under a lot of pressure from the United States.
What's somewhat disturbing for me, or a little disappointing for me, is if you read through all the mainstream Western media or American media following on the development on both sides or the whole thing, you don't read anything about the public anger against the tweet.
The Chinese.
It's only China, the government, or CCTV, or the sponsor, or Tencent.
Or the association.
I mean, within 3 hours, the decision by China CCTV was given thumbs up by 800,000 people. You know, that's the kind of indication of how much such a decision was supported. So it's not just the Chinese state machine, being behind this whole thing. Anyway, many thanks to Paul Dong and Han Hua. We're going to leave it there.